All right. Well, I want to thank you all for joining us for today's special webinar. We all know that we live in challenging times and a lot more people are working from their homes than have ever done before. And there are some new challenges that we're facing with regard to that. Last week, we did a webinar on some of the things Acronis can specifically do for remote workers. If you're interested in any of that information, please let us know. We'll send you a copy. But also, we wanted to look more generally at what it will take to set up a remote worker. And once that remote worker is set up, what is the checklist of ongoing things that we need to do? So this is our agenda for today. First, we'll talk about that, how to set up a remote worker effectively. And then we'll take a turn on how to secure that remote workplace on an ongoing basis. If you do have any questions as we're going through, please feel free to use the Q&A window at the top to let us know what questions you have. We'll try to answer as many of those as we can at the end. Those that we can't answer immediately, we'll send you emails. My name is Jonathan McCarrick. I'm the head evangelist here at Acronis, and I spend a lot of time doing remote work. I've been a remote worker myself for about 15 years. And the material that you're going to see here today was produced by a bunch of folks that hopefully you will find it useful for sharing both internally and also potentially with your customers as well. So remote work is the new deal. Everybody is being forced to work from home. And we have a feeling that after this crisis is over, that this will be an ongoing problem. I say problem, it'll be an ongoing situation for everybody. We see here that 54% of HR leaders indicated that poor technology or infrastructure is the biggest barrier they have to effective remote working. And we expect that there'll be a huge rise in the number of remote workers on the regular basis from this point going forward, especially once people have learned to do it. And because of this, MSPs have become the go-to providers and enablers for remote work. Most businesses, whether either have no IT guy at all, or their IT guy is somebody they consult with, or they have maybe one or two IT generalists that they have in their business. And because of this, they don't have significant enough resources to provide them strategic advice, to simplify their technology, to automate the deployment and reporting of it to be done, to enable that innovation, productivity, security, and orchestration that they need. So this becomes a chance for MSPs to expand into the cybersecurity area, become the MSSP as security is a top concern when people are doing remote work. As a matter of fact, we're seeing a ton of increase, positive impacts with regard to the impact of the COVID-19 situation, where there is a ton more stuff that is being done remotely with applications that allow remote workers to be effective from home. And so counterintuitively, many of these businesses are as busy as they've ever been. Matter of fact, just about every partner that I've talked to over the last couple of weeks is telling me they're twice as busy as they've been previously because people are taking the turn to moving everything into the cloud if they can. We're also seeing a huge amount of network usage impact. People are using the internet far more than they've done before, and they're working longer hours with regard to it. And so we're seeing huge impacts on the networks that these people are operating over, and so therefore they're not as reliable as they used to be. So let's take a look at how we can set up a remote worker efficiently. We'll take a look at a couple of scenarios in here. This is going to be our current checklist. We're going to go through establishing a dedicated support channel, verifying the connectivity, setting up both remote management and remote access, and then looking at some collaboration tools. And then in part two, we'll take a look at the ongoing security. So the first thing you would want to do if you are going to have new remote workers that have never been remote workers before set up a dedicated support channel. These folks done this before, and they're going to need to be able to do this effectively over time. So what you want to do is create first a work from home support policy and make sure that you account for it in the pricing for your VPN and remote users. Make sure that you have a good policy that they can follow with regard to support. For example, provide a free hour of support for VPN users for troubleshooting the "My VPN doesn't work" tickets, right? The second part of that is to establish a customer support center with people who specialize in different aspects of this remote work and to give them a tiered SLA. The per customer email addresses will be able to give you a one-day response SLA, give them a specific work from home email address to go for, and then give them either per customer Slack or team channels that provide them a 2 to 4 hour response and give them a clear escalation path if they're having issues, because they're out of productivity and they don't really have a whole lot of options when they're working from home. And you want to make sure that you can communicate how the clients need to be communicated with, and not everybody has the same tools, but here are a few that we think are good tools to be using. Obviously, Zoom has had its set of setbacks lately, but I believe that they're working on those. But there are plenty of other different tools that you can use to meet with people remotely, whether it's Microsoft Teams, GoToMeeting, WebEx, Slack, a lot of other tools that you can use as well. And then one of the issues that MSPs have specifically is scheduling out time folks to talk to them, and we would recommend that you use a calendaring service like Calendly or Eventbrite to make sure that you have a way to set people up so that if you have more than you can handle coming in at any one time, that you can schedule out time to visit with them. Next thing you want to do is verify the remote connectivity of the remote worker. First thing you want to do is test the headquarters connectivity. Servers that are in the office or data centers need to have ability to be tested regularly against what the ISP is supposed to be offering with something like Speed Test Plus, or that you're always knowing when the connectivity is slow in the office. Prevent a lot of unnecessary tickets or the ability to deal with tickets if things get slow at the office. And then you're going to point to the endpoint connectivity. For many of these tools, if your end user has poor connectivity at the endpoint, they're not going to be able to do their job very well. And so for each endpoint, you need to test for reliability, bandwidth, latency, jitter on that connection. And if it's slow, that remote access isn't very well. So you need to make sure that they have a good connection at their end as well. The next thing you want to do is set up remote management. Sometimes there are going to be things we want to, as IT folks, to help manage those users at their end. And so one of the things that we were recommending is getting a monitoring tool to keep systems up to date, onboard our tool like Kaseya, ConnectWise, SolarWinds, Atera, and our own Acronis features. That way we can monitor the health of the devices that are out there and make sure we're proactive about getting these folks all the updates they need. And also for break fix, sometimes need to be fixed. And so we want to make sure that there are management tools in place so we can get with them. Some of them are built-in tools like Windows Remote Assistance or Remote Desktop, and therefore there's no installation required and a minimal amount of setup. There are some other specialized tools that you can set up and use, including TeamViewer, Real VNC. There's some installation required, and they may need some additional configuration, but they're much more specialized for the purpose. Now we've got our remote user at home. They need to remotely access what we have in our corporate system. The biggest thing that we recommend is that you deploy a VPN access point. Either a software or hardware one. If the customer doesn't have a static IP or good connectivity, you can spin up a VPN and install the VPN controller there. For example, you can use pfSense or OpenVPN or zero tier. As a Windows alternative, maybe you look at softether.org. And then you want to make sure you enable access to the company data only through the VPN, that there's no other ways to get to it. Everybody has to use the VPN. And then this way, you can control who has access to what is going on. You need to make sure your clients don't share their computers with other house tenants and remind them about the continuing to follow the company's policy, i.e. not allowing others to look at their screen. Work is for you. It is not for everybody else. Just because you're working at home doesn't mean you should be loose with the way that you use company resources. Then deploy and configure the VPN clients onto all of the endpoints. Make sure that they all work. Make sure that the network drives are working via the VPN connection if they're provisioned. And make sure the routes are configured properly and that the personal traffic does also go through that VPN. So you don't want to be sending personal traffic over the VPN either. So you want to be keeping your work time to be working time and your personal time to time. And then finally, you want to take a look at some additional tools like firewalls like WatchGuard or Sophos XG and URL filtering configurations, maybe to keep people from being maliciously attacked by going to the wrong websites, or at least to keep them on task by not going maybe to Facebook. The next thing you want to do is set up some collaboration tools so that these folks can not only work with the data at the office, but also can work with each other. We have a couple of recommendations that you should apply immediately. The first is for email. People are going to use email far more than they've ever done before. And so therefore you want to increase the mailbox quotas, and you may want to increase the amount of size limits for attachments and so forth. Normally somebody might take a large file and walk it over to somebody, but now they can't. They're not in the same place. The second thing we should recommend is for communications that you choose one messaging app for your entire organization. We're recommending that you use apps with team messaging capability so that you can, ask, hey, are you available? And then you can bring them onto communications like Microsoft Teams or Slack so that you can have improved collaboration. We're also recommending that you use a lot more video conferencing. And you should choose one video conferencing app for the entire organization and recommend to use specialized apps for additional capabilities like recording it. When you are doing the video conferencing, we recommend that you turn on the video so that people can communicate face-to-face. That will help drive familiarity. And then finally, we also are recommending file sharing. This is great for making sure that we have a single set of flows for storing of documents and so forth, but adopt a single file sync and share program, for example, OneDrive or our own Acronis Files products. So make sure that you have increased that email volume and that those quotas are adequate for what they're doing. When it comes to file sharing, if you don't have it, we do have Acronis Files Cloud. Acronis Files Cloud is free for MSPs in response to this COVID-19 situation. So if you are an MSP offering our stuff, we have a special right now where you can offer, we have it to you for free. You can charge or not charge your customers as you feel is appropriate. Or you can get our Acronis Files Advanced product for on-premise customers. And then, of course, there are a number of other products. You want to make sure that those have large enough storage quotas on them so that they can be adequately used. And then we have our collaboration. We said that you want to make sure that you have lots of features for free and that the teams can make the most of robust video conferencing on apps like Microsoft Teams and Slacks. For video conferencing, Zoom is the most popular one, but it does lack a chat feature. It's also had its share of issues lately, but there's also other competitors like WebEx and GoToMeetings. And then for chat, we recommend, again, you should have one chat, but Slack offers an excellent chat with lots of integrations. But there's also things like Microsoft Teams and HipChat. And then for productivity, we're recommending some shared notes items like Evernote, Google Keep, OneNote, and Notion. But having a single place to keep all of your work notes is great. We're having many more work meetings than we used to have, and this is a great way to organize all the material that comes out of those. All right, so we've set up our worker. They're now at home. How do we keep their remote workplace secure? And so we're going to take a look at a couple of parts of that. We're going to look at establishing and publishing remote work policies, using what we call anti-software, making sure you're protected, keeping programs up to date, making sure you have regular backups, and then finally, you need to educate your end users. So let's talk about establishing and publishing a remote work policy. It's important that our workers know what's expected of them, and so we need to establish and publish a remote work policy for them to adhere to. The purpose is to is to nurture the desired behavior and ensure security of the home environments and on devices like your home router. And it should include a couple of things. It should include what are the approved apps, mandate only approved apps, including your VPN and encryption. Talk about physical security, recommendations for physically securing the work devices at the home. Talk about password hygiene, not using a sticky note on your monitor, for instance, but maybe go a lot further than that and go say, hey, you should use a password manager, and we can dictate that, or even using multi-factor authentication if that's possible. And then we go to the home network security. We want to make sure that we have a router login and Wi-Fi passwords that's difficult to guess, and that we change it certainly from the default SSID, and we can update the firmware to the latest version. What we want to do is make a situation where we're minimizing the impact of having our home network involved. And then we want to talk about secure behavior. We want to make sure that we correct any behavior to avoid falling victim to phishing and scams. Especially now with COVID-19, there are many more emails that sound perfectly legitimate that are related around these things, and they're not. They're scams, they're malicious, and we need to make sure that we're protecting our folks. So let's talk about protecting the environment itself. First is you want to adopt perhaps some RMM tools for endpoint protection. There's a bunch of different ones that we have listed here, but the purpose is to make sure that you have antivirus and anti-malware protection. By the way, if you're a service provider with us, we have introduced our Acronis Cyber Protect functionality, which does have great antivirus capability built within it, and it is free. Well, it's a free add-on to our backup product until August. And so again, just like Files, take advantage of this opportunity to help your customers out. We will just charge you for the normal price for backup, but you can sell the Cyber Protect now. And then it also has the vulnerability and patch management solution built into the Cyber Protect as well. But we do think that vulnerability assessments are really important to know what things are not patched, and then once you know what is not patched, that you do apply the patches quickly, especially in these times with a lot of end users. Previously, maybe we've ignored the endpoint as a source of trouble for us, but now we need to make sure that all of these things are secure. Want to look at the operating system settings as well, make sure that we've optimized that. And then also browser settings, and much more importantly, the extensions that are added to those browsers, make sure that they're only approved ones that we really want on there. Some extensions are fairly harmful in terms of setting up our security. You want to be able to protect your networks. You want to use the RMM to enable and configure firewalls, and you also want to use it for URL filtering for both the server and the endpoints. We want to control what URLs are opened on these devices, because frequently that is how access is gained, especially on the endpoints. People are going to be at home. They're going to be having these devices available to them. Nobody's looking over their shoulder. And so by enabling URL filtering, we can prevent them from going to malicious websites proactively. And use anti-software. By that we mean anti-virus, anti-malware software. At a minimum, use Windows Defender if no other anti-software is available. And if using different anti-software, ensure that you have regular automatic updates of the definitions. Make sure that you're always up to date with those. And when using anti-software, you want to choose one that has anti-ransomware capabilities built into it. Obviously, these endpoints, if they get ransomware, that means you've lost the productivity person probably for more than a day, because how long is it going to take them to get back up and running, given the fact that no IT person can come to them, and that likely the only thing you can do is mail devices around, or maybe have them picked up. But the fact of the matter is, this is not an easy problem at this point if somebody gets ransomware on one of these endpoints and you expect them to continue working. We also want to make sure that we keep the programs updated. We said that patching and vulnerability assessment were really important. The minimum, enable automatic updates with Windows Update, and then use vulnerability assessment and patch management tools from your RMM vendor. You want to make sure that those devices are constantly being looked after to make sure that we have the most up-to-date versions, because that is how people get infected. A new vulnerability is discovered, it is passed out, and then before you know it, people are being affected. Next, we want to talk about ensuring regular backups. Of course, Acronis has great backup products, but we want to make sure that we're installing and using that backup product. Very typically, many organizations do not do backup on the endpoints. They figure they've got everything in the VPN, they've got everything in the corporate servers, they're on the virtual machines, my endpoint doesn't matter. But I want you to consider the fact that now these people are using these devices at home, and if their device goes kaput, there is no way to help them. So at least if we had an easy to use backup solution, we might be able to help them help themselves get back up and running using their backup solution. And that's going to be incredibly important. So we want to install and use that backup configure for regular backups. We do want to have, if possible, the ability to back up to local storage, because it is always the easiest and fastest way to recovery. But there's usually limited storage capacity, which means that we can have fewer versions of that. So what we do think is important is that you can also back up to the cloud. You should always follow the rule of 3-2-1, which means that you should have 3 copies of your data, 2 of which are backups on different kind of medium. 1 of those should live somewhere off-site. By off-site in this case, meaning not in the same location as the end user. Nice thing about cloud storage for that off-site location is it has unlimited capacity and a long retention policy that you can use. The downside is that when you need to download it, you have to download it over the internet. But the fact of the matter is, at least you'd have a good usable copy at all times. So we think with that rule of 3-2-1 that the best program is to have a disk to cloud. You have your original that is saved to a local disk and then replicated in the cloud. That gives you the best of all worlds to make sure that you're being up and running all the time. Finally, we need to educate our end users and customers. Most folks, this is the first time that they've ever had to work from home. And it can be scary for them. And so we have to give them some rules to make it much more easy for them to use. Here's some action items that we think you should take. First, secure your computer. Do not share your computer access to that corporate network. So nobody shares passwords, nobody shares credentials. Then we want to make sure that we're using a secure router, having at the minimum WPA2 encryption enabled make it harder to hack into your home network. And you should not use the default SSID and password. Way too many people, get their speed internet access in, and they never change the default password, and they're wide open. Make sure you determine what OS settings are important. You need to make sure we're enabling the firewalls, enabling auto updates, enabling Windows Defender, turning on all of the things that we can turn on to make that remote worker as secure as possible. We need to talk about what browser settings and plugins are important in both ways. Some of them are really good for adding security and adding ad blockers. Ad blockers aren't only good because they block you from having to look at ads. They also block out malicious stuff. And so we want to make sure we have good ad blockers on. Next thing is to talk about how not to catch a fish in the email. Don't open up any of those COVID emails. Generally, people have bad email hygiene. they'll open up anything. This is a particularly important time to talk to people about what is important to open and not open, and making sure that you're aware of who it's from. And if you do get an email that has a header on it from a particular location, look at the underlying email address that it came in from, because it is easy enough to spoof the visible name, but you need to look at what the actual email is that came in. We need to talk to them about how to avoid Zoom bombing and such. Zoom bombing has become a big topic over the last couple of weeks, and as well as a number of the other vulnerabilities. And there's some things you can proactively do to prevent these things, like using a unique ID, not reusing the same ID over and over again, and making sure that you're using passwords for each of the meetings, and making sure that password is communicated personally, not automatedly, to each person who is receiving it, so that you know who has that password. You don't want to make it available like up on a website that here's the password, right? And for the Microsoft Teams, there are some resources available as well. There's, you can see that we've got some links here. We're going to send out this deck to everybody on MS Teams training for end users. We'll talk about some of the ways that they can get their best use out of this, including a toolkit, a training center, and some custom training that they can take. We've also put together a number of other resources here for you to share with your teams about how to learn to work remotely. And the first group of them is optimizing the collaboration tools. So you'll see we've got stuff for working remotely on Slack or WebEx or Microsoft Teams. And then we need to talk about how do we lead and manage a remote team. And so we've got some articles here about how to do remote team management and tips for working with a large team. And then finally, for that end user who is working at home, how to work remotely, how to be an effective person working from home, how to build a productive home office, how to work, work from home, how to have virtual meeting etiquette, what is the best way to be a good worker from home. And hopefully some of these resources will be useful for you. Speaking of video meeting etiquette, there are a couple of things that we are looking at. The first of which is wear pants, keep it professional, dress for the part, make sure that you get up and go to work every day like you ordinarily would, and make sure that you are dressed as you would want to be seen at work. Second, reduce noise. Nothing ruins a voice call like noise, barking dogs, crunching chips, loud steps. The one way to do this is to put yourself on mute to make sure that that you're not being overheard, and come off of mute. So mute is your friend, but be aware that you are on mute. And so you might have to come off of mute, and there might be more than one mute button involved. So make sure you understand what you're doing. So pick one mute button, stick to it. That way you can come back so people aren't saying, hey, are you still on mute, and so forth. Rule 3, avoid juggling other tasks. When you're on that call, give it all your attention. If you're doing email and multitasking and doing other things, and then while you're distracted, somebody asks you a question, you may not be able to respond appropriately, and you're slowing down. Appreciate everyone's time in the room, be present, and that way the meeting can be as effective as we can make it. Rule 4, don't eat on the call. It's easy enough. We're at home. We got the kitchen right there. There's a TV right there. We can be at home, but we shouldn't act like we're at home. So all that crunching, munching is not appropriate for this. And then finally, rule 5, plan ahead. Make sure that you're ready to go. Make sure everything's plugged in. If you need to have headsets on or speakers going, or you need to set up a particular thing, make sure you do that all ahead of time, and so you're ready to go when the meeting time starts, so that you're not wasting other people's time while you get set up to work. Everybody else is doing the same thing, and so if everybody is polite, we'll get more work done. So we hope these tips will help you a little bit as we go forward. It should help everyone. At this time, I'm going to go over to see if there's anything in the Q&A window. Before we do, if you could get out your phone and get at this QR code, we would like to have a survey, whether you enjoyed this material or not. We'll be sending these materials to you afterward, and please take the survey. We'll also be sending you the recording of this so you can share that with others, both internally and externally if you feel that's appropriate. And we'll be doing more of these kinds of trainings coming up here in the near future that will have a specific orientation towards your customers. And so we hope to have that available to you. We'll make a calendar available to you as to when that's going to be so that you can share that broadly with your customers. They can come and enjoy some of this with you as well. With that, I want to thank you for your time today. I'm going to go over to the chat window and see if we have anything in, like I said.